So one of the things that always struck me that I learned very quickly in working with the researchers in the community is children are a lot smarter than we think, especially sick children. Sick children grow up really quickly, and I think that was always very much appreciated, the role of the child. The hospital itself has always been very family-centered and family decision-making. And so what that means is involving the child in those things. So again, whether it's, Children's Hospital in Boston or any other type of children's hospital, that appreciation for the role of children and listening to children was always there, certainly in the clinical world, and I think really translated to the research environment. So when we have discussions about children's role, their assent and their involvement in their decision making, it always felt very, very natural, and I think recognizing children of different ages and how you have to do things differently. And then also very quickly recognizing the upper age of the spectrum when teens are very capable of making their own decisions and letting them, be very, very involved. So I always felt, maybe people think, this is progressive in the thinking of, in the research ethics world, but starting 30 years ago, this was something that I quickly realized when I worked with the committee. I think the issue of written assent forms and having people sign that. I think that's sort of taken a life of its own, and I think there are a lot of individuals, including myself, that feel that that's not where we, especially in dealing with children, that's not where the emphasis should be. That the emphasis should be on dialogue and discussion with children at whatever level they are capable of doing that. So where a lot of institutions quickly required written forms, for different age groups, for many years, and including now, we have a lot of things that we don't. We really emphasize the verbal and the discussion before, involving children in the assent process. So, I've learned a lot. And also, I'll share an interesting story that happened probably about 10 years ago that relates to this. A research coordinator had called me and said to me that there was a 13-year-old child who had been asked to provide assent and had said no. However, the parents wanted the child to participate in the research. And the question to me, which I'm glad came to me, was how much should we pressure the child? And so first thing I said, first of all, we don't pressure the child. Let's stop there. So, and I thank them very much for calling me. And it turns out that when I asked a little more information, that this was a 14-year-old child who had a transplant, had a kidney disease from very young on, had always been to the hospital back and forth, and that this particular research was really looking at combinations of drugs, and that involved some extra blood tests or scans or whatever, but really didn't involve any investigational drugs. And this particular child knew that he could get the same drugs, the same care, and not be in the research. So when the call came in, I called the IRB chair and said, how do we guide? And they said, well, let's have someone independent. Let's have someone independent to the research team. Maybe if there's a social worker or someone else, go and talk to the child to sort of understand, ask them what they're thinking and talk to the parents. And so the social worker went in and spoke to the child, and the child clearly said, he said, I've been a patient here for a long time. I haven't had any ability to make any decisions about my medical care. He said, I have a decision to make. Someone asked me to think about this. I have a decision to make. I know I can get care. I know I can get the drugs. I just want to say no. And so, what that child at 13 was doing was asserting their developing autonomy. And I think once we pointed that out to the investigator, and to the team, there was no question they weren't going to enroll the child because it made a lot of sense. It made a lot of sense what that child was doing. So, those are interesting things when we think about, do children, and this was a 13-year-old, certainly not a child, but still not an adult, and they're thinking, they're smart. They can think about these things. They can be asked. And that was a great example of that to me.